Hi, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this new episode of the Rise Up Radio. And today I have with me a very special guest. Her name is Teresa Rose. Teresa, welcome to the Rise Up Radio today.
Hello.
All right. So, folks, Teresa is an organizational development consultant and the founder of ConsultHer. And she has over 15 years of HR experience spread across multiple industries. And currently, she's using her organizational development lens to enable organizations to look at talent problems from a very bird's eye view and then go into detail into crafting impactful and integrated solutions. So, Teresa, welcome again, and would love to hear about your journey and your experience a little bit, for our audience to get acquainted.
Yeah, thank you. I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to this conversation. And thank you for the warm introduction. And you probably summarised it really well. So I'm an organisational development consultant, and that means looking through the lens of the whole system and what are the interconnected, integrated elements when I'm thinking about my work, but then working that down to, okay, well, what are the actions that need to be taken? But it's looking at things very holistically and the fact that you can't change one thing without changing another, because then there are usually negative impacts.
That's correct. Absolutely. Well, so Teresa, skills are a buzzword these days, right? And with the entire discussion of the future of workplace and future of workforce, talent development as a practice is evolving rapidly,
Yeah.
right? So let's take that lens into our conversation today because I think that's going to be very impactful for our audience, right? So when we start talking about future of work, first of all, what comes to your mind? When I say future of work, is it the workplace changing? Is it, the organizational design changing? Is it the skills changing? Or is it everything that's going to change and we need a totally new view of talent development as a result?
Yeah, it's multiple factors. You've explained some of them there, and what I'm also seeing is lots of tension.
Hmm.
There's tension between chaos because of
Hmm.
geopolitical crises and everything that's happening externally, and then AI on the top of that as well. And that tension is between that chaos and control,
Hmm.
and that provides a lots of challenges between how do we deal with these immediate crises versus long range thinking.
Hmm.
And we've heard a lot about VUCA in the past, but we're now starting to hear a lot more about BANI.
Hmm.
So BANI, for those that haven't heard of it before, means brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible.
Hmm.
And that makes leadership much harder, but
Hmm.
it also means those human aspects of critical thinking, analytical thinking,
Hmm.
and personal attributes like resilience
Hmm.
are even more critical.
Yeah. Okay, so this is definitely new word. So we can basically say that the future of workplace is or has to get acquainted with the term Bani and be more comfortable with it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd also say that some of the things that we are hearing about,
Hmm.
to be mindful of them and look at your own context as well.
Hmm.
So we keep hearing that roles are disappearing in organizations.
Yeah.
However, they still really matter because they
Hmm.
give people identity, structure, and there's also legal clarity,
Yeah.
especially things like the EU Pay Transparency Directive that's coming in, means
Hmm.
that work needs to be compared. But the thing is, as with that tension of chaos and control, these roles aren't static because the work isn't.
Yeah.
So having skills and skills data are
Hmm.
what makes the organization more dynamic because it shows what people can do, what they could
Right.
do next, and where you can redeploy that capability with everything in such a flux.
Right.
And we use the word change, and I don't even know if the word change is the right thing to use because it's constant, it's business as usual, and change
Right.
has always been there. it's purely the volume that leaders now have to wrestle with when they're
Right.
thinking about their talent and where and how they deploy their talent. And they
Correct.
need to start thinking of their people as and what they can do as a capability mix. What's the right
Hmm.
capability mix for the moment that they find themselves in? And
Hmm.
how can they discover, have that
Hmm.
discovery with the
Yeah.
data around their people, a discovery dividend around
Yeah.
capabilities that they didn't even know that they'd got, and surface those to use those in these challenging times.
Interesting. So when you say this, right, I mean, and that is where the entire conversation behind capabilities and skill first organizations become really, really important because it's not about tasks anymore. I think as organizations become more fluid, it's going to be more about what can you deliver as an individual, and then what are other people delivering, and how can you then compare them, right? So let's go deeper into this paradigm of skills first organization. It's not a new terminology. I think it's been there for a few years now,
Yeah.
and but I think it's becoming more and more relevant for organizations to start looking at it in a dynamic world that we're living in, right? And you have worked with a lot of organizations to start bringing this paradigm into reality, which is thinking about skills first organization. So let's start at the very very high level, at the top level, right? I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong. When you start talking of skill first organization, the first thing that has to be put in place is at a very high level blueprint of what a skill first organization is going to look like, isn't it?
Yeah, there are several interconnected pillars. I'm talking about a
Hmm.
lot of interconnections here and
Yeah.
interdependencies as
Right.
well. And it's really important not to look at them in isolation. That's where you
Hmm.
start to then run into problems, like I mentioned at
Yep.
the top of the intro. And to put those, to summarize those, there are probably five that I would say to concentrate on. And the first one being that the business strategy drives it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you have to start with those outcomes. It might sound like common sense, but the problem I see most people run into is they go off and looking at the technology and think, oh, well, everybody else is getting skills taxonomies or skills
Yep.
ontologies or talent marketplaces, whatever the technology might be,
Hmm.
without thinking, well, what are we wanting to really deliver here? What difference are we wanting to make?
Hmm.
And return on investment and cost, because these platforms cost a lot of money. The
Right.
time to implement them costs a lot of money. So I always say start with prototyping and
Hmm.
minimum viable products and cataloging lots of use cases
Right.
that have people and business metrics within them. So it's not all we're looking at talent acquisition and we want to reduce our time to hire.
Hmm.
It's a variety of metrics. So what business metric is that metric going to help? Yes, it's going to save you money and time, but
Hmm.
you need a mix of metrics. So first, my first part of the blueprint is
Hmm.
start with your business strategy. Start with those outcomes. What work creates
Yes.
value? What's changing? What new products, new markets,
Hmm.
new regulations might be impacting what your business needs to do and how
Yeah.
it operates.
Right.
The skills strategy has to follow the business and not sit
Hmm.
as a separate HR
Hmm.
initiative.
Hmm. Hmm.
Second, it would be, I've started to go into that a little bit. The second one is structure and operating model. So
Okay.
that capability has to be able to move, which I mentioned in your previous question.
Hmm.
Most organizations are still too rigid, but it's where you might have more flexibility and
Hmm.
stability. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned earlier, skills-based organizations are not new. And the first academic paper I found when I started researching this dates back to 1992.
Wow.
And it was skills-based HR. And it
Yep.
was in organizations like consultancies that need to understand what skills their people have to place them in their
Hmm.
client
Hmm.
organizations. So it's does your context actually fit with this way of thinking? But also you don't have to take all of it. You can take different elements. So
Yeah.
it's thinking through your structure and your operating model and what's going to help you give you functional flexibility.
Hmm.
And then the third is skills intelligence because you've got to have the data.
Correct.
It's really important you start to map your data out earlier and in your different data sources and testing it as well. So it needs a stress test. Is in that data and the model that you're starting to develop, does it answer the questions that your people and your leaders need to answer? It's
Mm.
like, can managers use it to plan
Yeah.
their workforce capability? Can employees see how they can progress in the organization? Can they develop their careers? And can leaders make those build, buy, borrow, bot decisions that we're starting to hear about with the use of AI? And if the answer's no to that, then it's not ready.
Mm.
I've mentioned interdependent data. So your systems and interdependent data, that skills data can't sit in isolation. It has to be combined
Right.
to make those data informed decisions.
Mm.
And finally, and probably the most important, is story and culture. Is
Mm.
what stories are you telling about the way that you're going to do this? And are you co-creating that as well in terms of the
Mm.
culture? It's really
Yeah.
important to co-create this with the business from the outset, and getting the understanding around how skills matter and how skills are going to be used and discussed,
Yeah.
and not making things a heavier lift for
Correct.
your organization. As if you're going to do this, what are you removing? What are you making easier? Where are you reducing
True.
friction in as many
True.
processes as possible?
Right. I think the last bit is really important because it connects it for the employees, right? And it ties up into the entire employee value proposition. I'm going to come to that because I have a question for you over there. But before go there, I want to focus maybe do get into the workshop mode. So let's say if this is the blueprint that we have, and how about we take one example of leadership skills, right? How do we use this blueprint to start looking at the entire leadership development, capabilities or leadership capabilities in the organization? So how would that look like?
I've just read another piece about leadership. There seems to be some nice new research about leadership in a skills-based environment that fits well,
Hmm.
though it's not written about a
Hmm.
skills-based environment. Some of the
Yep.
things that I've already mentioned, it seems to fit with that because I think there needs to be a degree of empathy for leadership within all of this, with the amount of change that they're having to face. And again, I don't like using the word change. It's just all of the things that are being that it's like a deluge of things that are happening
Yep.
within
The
organization.
dynamic, the dynamic scenario or the dynamic
Yeah,
environment we find ourselves in, right? So I think
yeah.
that's a nice segue to change because change is transactional, but I think evolution is not transactional.
Yeah, and there's an element as well. And the paper I was reading was about distributed leadership, and
Hmm.
it's another topic that I remember working with inside an organization with leaders to look at distributed leadership within agile ways of working.
Hmm.
And this is what that paper's talking about. And there's an element of there, leadership becomes more contextual, and it's not about the leader's position.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like football. I've been using a football analogy a lot recently. My partner's a big Aston Villa fan. So I was thinking, okay, what football and skills-based organisations is quite a nice comparator there.
Yeah.
So with football, just because someone's the captain, if there's a penalty that needs to be taken, doesn't necessarily mean that the
The
captain's going to
captain is
take
going to
the
take it.
penalty.
Correct.
It could be any of the other players. It could be even the goalkeeper.
Correct.
And it's about the right person stepping up because they're equipped in that moment to do
Hmm.
it. And though formal leadership roles still matter
Correct.
within this, it's about that fluid and that functional
Hmm.
flexibility that I mentioned earlier, and development of leadership based on both capability and trust
Hmm.
within this. So, do I trust my leader? Who are the people that are naturally people go to and talk to and confide in?
Correct.
And who are the ones that are stable, that have valuable leadership skills that
Hmm.
aren't necessarily technical leadership skills?
Right.
They're more personal attributes, and that might be personality drivers. And I think within skills, sometimes it can be, oh, when we can teach someone
Hmm.
this, or we
Hmm.
can develop that skill,
Hmm.
and not necessarily it's what personal attributes that are
Hmm.
already there, those traits,
Yeah.
so that they have greater stability when those systems become more brittle that they're working within. that they can provide clarity for people when things are very muddy.
They don't go right. Yeah, correct.
That there's influence without necessarily having authority, and maybe we
Mm,
start to measure leadership in different ways through different
mm,
skill signals than
mm.
what we've traditionally done.
Yeah. So I think in essence, we need a totally new paradigm to start thinking about leadership skills as well, right? I think, like you said, for example, even for a manager to manage tasks, in a skill-based organization, they need to start looking at what skills do their team members have, and then they
Yeah.
can allocate tasks accordingly. So it's not only at an organization level, but it trickles down to the, nth level, to the most lowest level in the organization, right? And that basically changes the entire paradigm of how managers start to manage their teams in a nutshell. But as you go on, the core soft skills, the core people management skills that managers have are going to become even more important, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and also there's that aspect of AI and the discussion that's now happening where managers or leaders will be not only managing human labor, they'll be
Yeah,
managing AI
correct.
labor. And there's that discussion around work, tasks, and then skills. And
Hmm.
I'm hearing, oh, AI only performs tasks. But they also have skills because, like you're
Right.
looking at individual skill proficiency levels, you're going to be
You have
looking at
AI skill proficiencies as well.
is the AI. So, as a leader,
Right.
you've got to have that wide lens view to look at all the elements of your labor portfolio,
Yeah,
your capability portfolio, in essence, to
yeah,
make those decisions. And I think going back to the first question around future, there's that challenge then around efficiency versus enrichment, and efficiency
hmm,
being the enemy of
hmm,
enrichment in terms of interesting work and jobs that people do. So
right.
there's leaders getting involved in the whole redesign of the organization because they
Hmm,
are really redesigning their future at the moment. And so that's another skill is to think very systems wide again. I keep talking about systems and think about how you're redesigning your organization because it is a completely brand new operating model and it's not purely bolting on AI to augment. There's
correct,
varying levels that a leader would be looking at.
correct. All right, great. So I'm gonna now come back to the employee value proposition that we started talking about, right?
Yeah.
So as in this scale-based organization, and as employees' expectations are evolving rapidly as well, right? What do I expect from the organization and the workplace? That's evolving. Different generations have different expectations, what they expect. So how does all this tie into the EVP, and how can organizations start thinking strategically to create organizations where people love to work, right? Where you have a sense of ownership and loyalty, because that's what HR organizations are striving for. How can we create that?
Yeah, we do go for that, and there is that loyalty, and there are those. I don't know whether there's necessarily there's a bigger generational difference as we think, because going back to jobs, younger people still want identity of a job. You
Mhm,
know, what is my
mhm.
job? What do I do here? Not I'm just a collection of skills because I'm so many things. And again, this is something that I've been hearing for many years, but it's probably even more vital now
Hmm.
is the employee value proposition moving from job security to employability security. So
Mhm.
if there isn't work for me in your organization, how are you and I working together to ensure I'm employable, whether it's inside the organization or outside of it?
Yeah,
Because you can't provide me a job
correct.
security for life now. That's quite rare.
Yeah.
And
And that's
careers
where
are
skills become
the
important, right?
exception.
That's where
Yeah,
skills become very important because they're transferable.
they do.
And you can use the same skills in other industries as well. It's just
Yeah.
that how can you start thinking about it? I think that's a very important, I would say, marketing tool for HR organization to sell the entire paradigm shift that they might be looking at when it comes to skill based or skill first organization, isn't it?
It is, and it's a as I said, both parties are really important in that. And learning and development has offered a lot of self-directed, and that hasn't always been
Not at all.
successful.
Yeah.
One of the pushes for skills-based organizations has been, well, people want career development, but if you
Mm,
can't always provide that career development, what can you provide instead to
mm,
employees? And there's also about helping people develop career portfolios. And again, this is really old thinking. It goes back to Charles Handy, I think like the
mm,
1980s, in
mm,
portfolio careers. And
mm.
they are starting to become more the predominant way of how people work.
Yeah.
And leaders can help people in their organizations to do that by offering more project-based work, offering cross-functional work,
True. True.
and crafting true internal mobility wherever they can, and not letting job titles trap their talent, which goes back
Right.
to my earlier point around that having
Right.
a dynamic workforce, and recognizing their skill contribution as well, and what contribution are they making with the skills that they're developing,
Right.
and ensuring that people are building these skills all the
Mm,
time to be
mm,
employable. And that means giving them space and time to practice, which is quite rare again as
mm,
well. And that's where organizations also erode the investment they make in their people development if they don't give them practice and time.
true.
And that's
True.
even more important with AI because it's
Right.
new to everyone. Unless you're a high-tech organization, largely this is very new to everyone in the organization.
That's true. So I think when you say that a lot of these concepts have been there for a very long time, and you're right,
Yes.
absolutely right. But I think the enabling technology was not available till now, right? Because if you were to do all this hard work of building a skills taxonomy, or start thinking of a skills first organization, then going into the nth level of measuring skills for each and every individual, and then aligning their tasks and their development with that horizontal of skills development, it takes a huge chunk of work, right? You need an army of people just to put this in place, manage it on an ongoing basis. But now with AI, this is becoming easier
Yeah.
and faster to be able to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think they're at the cusp of that revolution of how this can be implemented in a much shorter time and not wait for like months and months before fruits can start showing.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of obviously work that needs to be done to make sure you have the right data and the right information, but there's
Obviously.
also an element of thinking around your own context and what it is you want to measure and
Hmm.
why,
Hmm.
identifying what's most critical. And again, this is quite an old methodology in terms of strategy, and it
Hmm.
goes back to the resource-based view of strategy,
Right.
which was Barney's work back in the early 80s,
Hmm.
is what distinct capabilities do we have
Hmm.
that differentiates us from the competition? And that's
Yeah.
probably more important again with AI because everyone's got access to the same technology, but
Yeah.
it's how and where you're using it. Similarly with your people, how
Right.
you're developing them and what organizational context and culture and climate and processes and systems you develop that don't erode that investment, whether it's in AI, whatever, whether it's investment in your people, that you think through that
Hmm.
resource-based view.
Hmm. I think we are in for a very, very exciting world, Teresa. So now, what can L&D organizations do, right? I think there's a very tangible impact on learning and development as a function, and how they're starting to look at building capabilities, right? What do you think are the impact of AI as well as a skills first organization for an L&D team in an organization?
Okay. Again, this is like going a little bit of a history lesson for learning and development. I've been in the profession. I started in learning development, then organizational development for about 16 years. And I think in those 16 years, there's been that constant discussion about what title should we be. And it used to be training, then it's learning and development, then performance consultant,
Yeah.
we get performance architect,
Yeah.
business partner. And I think the ultimate question for learning and development, or the thinking that they would be best to do, is how skills-based practices are exciting for them because of the emphasis on reskilling,
Hmm.
upskilling, cross-skilling, but
Hmm.
it's also exposing.
Hmm.
So there's an emphasis on, well, what difference is this development making? And learning and development have an impact to play there and a role to play, but it's that system in the organization which I mentioned a moment ago around, well, what's happening to erode that investment? Because
Yeah.
it's a bit like the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. If I'm investing all this money
Yeah.
in upskilling my people, but I'm not giving them time to practice, or I'm giving them far too much information and it's cognitive overload,
Yeah.
are you going to spend that investment and then in about 90 days, 30 days, sorry, 90% of that investment's
Yeah.
gone?
Correct.
That's really a big question around this. And their credibility will get tested within
Hmm.
this environment.
Hmm.
And it's starting for them to think as well. And I've written about this around learning and development not sitting in their own lane,
Hmm.
is there's a people ecosystem at play here, and it's really important that they're working with that wider people ecosystem, not depending on the size of your
Hmm.
organization. So collaboration across that entire people function is pivotal.
Hmm.
And things like talent reward, workforce planning, strategic workforce planning
It's
are
all
key areas
interconnected.
where it's all connected.
Hmm.
And that's that new operating model we're starting to see, and there's a lot of being written as well about new people operating models. So
Yeah.
there's so much that's changing, and there's a massive impact on AI, but it seems to be of AI on learning and development, but it seems vastly about content. So
Correct.
it's ways of making more content cheaper, faster,
That's not the
and
real lever that AI can
no,
provide, right? I
that's
mean,
not going
we
to
don't need
make.
more content. We need more efficacy, right?
Yes. Yeah, so there's also those external things that are impacting learning and development that I said it's
Hmm.
impacting all the people function,
Right.
but there's maybe less of L&D thinking about themselves as
Yeah.
training providers to more of a capability architect within that capability portfolio. So they're starting to build that skills intelligence and infrastructure and making decisions based on that because they've got the dynamic data to make those
Hmm.
decisions.
Hmm.
Partnering really deeply on workforce planning
Hmm.
and what the cadence is around that. Um, More around personalized learning. We probably are finally going to get
Yeah.
towards real personalized learning,
Yeah.
but my fear is that there'll be that removal of the human side
Hmm.
altogether.
Hmm.
And it's interesting that some of the use cases that I'm seeing, I think Marco Zanders from used to be at Filtered has
Hmm.
written a piece for HBR
Hmm.
around use cases for AI. And the number
Yeah.
one use case on there is that people are using it for a therapist or a friend.
Yeah. That's
So
not a right use case.
yeah, no, that's because we're removing the human
Correct.
side so
Correct.
much of work and life,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
So again, going back to your question, it's more about L&D being that integrator across
Hmm.
because I always see L&D as having the benefit of a central intelligence because they
Hmm.
get to speak with so many stakeholders, which
Yeah.
would make it easier for them to connect
Correct.
all of those moving parts and those
And
interdependencies.
that's a very, very strategic mindset shift that needs to happen,
Yes.
no, Teresa. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of that execution focus needs to go away and strategic focus needs to come back in.
Yes.
And because execution focus can be taken care of by systems now, right? AI can take care of that. It's a strategic focus that you need to start thinking that we're not executioners of training programs, but we're basically architects of capabilities, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's a very strategic mindset shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're coming towards the end of our session today, Teresa. Any final words for organizations who are just starting to think about skills first organization? How can they get started? So three tips or three suggestions that you can make.
Yeah, I would say use cases, use cases, use cases, business metrics, business metrics, business metrics. It has to be business first before anything
Yeah.
else. Don't think you have to go all in. It could be parts. You could take aspects of the skills-based approach. And I
Hmm.
don't even think skills-based organizations is the right frame. It's a bit like learning organizations. Your organization's
Hmm.
made multiple things. Skills is only one part.
God delivers, yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you had a great time in this session. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights with us. I'm sure our audience is going to love this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for such great questions as well.
Our pleasure. All right, there you go, folks. I'll see you for the next episode of the Rise Up Radio. Till then, you folks take care and be safe. Bye bye.